20 years covering the military, I've never heard the term love
Never
tap
heard.
with respect to airstrikes, especially ones that were specifically targeting military targets.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. Today on the show, the U.S. and Iran are still exchanging fire. So why does the Trump administration and the president insist the U.S. and Iran are still in a ceasefire? And what exactly is a love tap? Plus, the cruise at the center of the deadly Hantavirus outbreak is heading to the Canary Islands, but locals are not happy about it. Up first, though, U.S. Central Command says American forces fired on and disabled 2 Iranian-flagged tankers on Friday. CENTCOM alleges that the tankers were violating the ongoing U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. It's coming one day after CENTCOM says that 3 U.S. warships were targeted by Iran. The U.S. military claimed that this was an unprovoked attack and that U.S. forces fired back in self-defense. Meanwhile, the Iranian military says that the U.S. attacked first. Now, despite all of that, on Thursday, President told ABC News that the ceasefire is still in effect and that the recent strikes against Iran were, quote, just a love tap. So it's unclear what that is, but could it lead us to an all-out war? And how far are both sides willing to go in keeping the ceasefire in place? For this, I want to bring back 2 days in a row. How lucky are we? Courtney Kube, senior national security correspondent for NBC News. Hi, Court.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Let's talk about this love tap. So we spoke yesterday about Project Freedom being essentially, quote unquote, over, as had been communicated in both reporting and from the administration. But CENTCOM announced this morning that the U.S. fired on 2 more tankers that allegedly violated the blockade. And I want to note here that the U.S. again fired from a fighter jet to disable the commercial vehicles. There were other hits, I should say, also yesterday. What is going on in the Strait of Hormuz? Is it over? Is it not over? Walk us through it.
It is far from over. And not just did they fire from F-18s, but they were F-18s off of the George H.W. Bush. So that's the carrier that just got into the region in the last 2 weeks or so. It's the first time that we're aware of, anyway, that they've conducted airstrikes as part of any of this ongoing conflict in the Middle East. So this was part of the blockade. Allegedly, according to U.S. Central Command, these 2 tankers were trying to go to an Iranian port in the Gulf of Oman, which they say was in violation of the ongoing U.S. military blockade of ships going to or coming from Iranian ports. And so they warned them via the communication on the radio. They said they warned them multiple times. And then ultimately, for the second and now third time, they've fired on these ships using fighter jets, disabling part of the ship and forcing them to not be able to dock in the Iranian port that they wanted to. So very critically, this has been a very confusing week, right? Because we've heard about the possibility of a resumption of major combat operations. We have obviously not seen that happen. Then there was the beginning and then the abrupt halt of this Project Freedom, which was an effort to move ships, civilian ships, through this sort of passageway in the southern Strait of Hormuz. And now there is this ongoing blockade, and this specifically was part of the blockade.
What's interesting is, on the one hand, the president is saying we are locked, we are loaded, we are ready. From your reporting yesterday, for instance, you talked about how during this ceasefire, they have actually built up their military assets in the region, the United States, that is, as well as Iran. But then on the other hand, it has become quite obvious that the president does not want to communicate as to whether or not this ceasefire has been broken, right? Calling this, for instance, a love tap, not a break in the ceasefire. Iran's military says the U.S., in fact, violated the ceasefire Thursday when it attacked an Iranian oil tanker. Do we understand exactly what Iran wants to do about what they are seeing as a violation of this ceasefire, how else they are communicating their messaging?
So the U.S. military is very clearly saying that these were defensive acts. So this was, the love tap was specifically, which, by the way, 20 years covering the military, I've never heard the term love tap with respect to airstrikes, especially ones that were specifically targeting military targets. So this was specific to 3 U.S. Navy destroyers. They were inside the Gulf as part of Project Freedom. This is, again, where it gets confusing because all of these missions are sort of start bleeding over into one another. They were the 3 U.S. Navy destroyers. They were making their way through the Strait of Hormuz, out of the Persian Gulf, back into the Gulf of Oman, because Project Freedom had been halted, paused, ended, whatever the actual word here is. While they were transiting through, Iran launched off a number of cruise missiles, some drones, and several of these fast boats. The U.S. military was able to repel that attack, but then the U.S. responded with pretty aggressive airstrikes inside Iran. So they hit in Bandar Abbas, they hit Qasem Island, and they hit very specific military targets. Now, when I asked people yesterday when we found out about this, okay, so the U.S. just violated the ceasefire, right? You took direct strikes against the Iranian military and the Revolutionary Guard Corps facilities. And they said, well, no, they were defensive. They attacked us first. And I said, okay, so Iran violated the ceasefire, right? And all they keep telling us is it's a political decision. And then we heard from President Trump, he said, not a violation of the ceasefire. These are just love taps. It's a huge question that reporters need to continue to ask the administration. How is this not another violation of the ceasefire?
So can you help square this for us? Because our colleague Peter Nicholas spoke to the president and he asked him if the war was over. The president said it wasn't. He said it's over when they sign a deal. It's over when it's over, he said. And yet they say the ceasefire has continued to be maintained in spite of all of the reporting that you just laid out for us, in that there's actual strikes happening, not just, by the way, over the Strait of Hormuz at this point now. It is progressed back to the land. And we all know, as we've seen these wars kind of progress over history, when you have these kind of small incremental strikes, oftentimes they lead to kind of bigger all-out confrontations and war once again. So if you can, Court, try and square what you're seeing on the ground there with the fighting and the messaging that we're getting both from the Pentagon and the White House.
So the messaging from the Trump administration is very clear. Their paramount main goal right now is to make a deal. President Trump has made it very clear that despite all the bluster and we're going to blow you off the face of the world and we're going to annihilate Iran and all of these things that he's saying, his actions are making it pretty clear that he is not interested in restarting major combat operations.
But how is the messaging clear when you're building up military assets in the region, when you're continuing to fire, it seems, on Iranian military assets in the region, when you are communicating that you at any moment are willing to descend back into an all-out war with the country? It doesn't seem clear to me.
It's not clear because the messaging is all over the place, all over the place. It is. I've never seen anything like it, where there are very senior parts of this administration who are not on the same page, whether it's behind the scenes or it's just in their public messaging.
And by the way, if we think back to last week, right, you have Hegseth testifying in front of the House, in front of the Senate, saying we're not at war, right? So they don't need to get congressional approval. And yet Peter Nicholas asking the president today, is the war over? And he says the war is not over, right? So that essentially means the United States is at war.
Yeah. So officially, Operation Epic Fury, which was the military operation, the war that started in February, that's officially on pause right now. Okay. Now, that's another place where there's not constant communication or consistent communication between the military and the administration, because the administration notified Congress and said hostilities have terminated. Whereas there are men and women, tens of thousands of them, who are forward in CENTCOM right now, who are still technically assigned to Operation Epic Fury, should in fact the president want to restart major combat operations. In the meantime, they're enforcing the blockade. Some of them were enforcing Project Freedom for 48 hours or so. So they're really trying to have everything both ways.
So meanwhile, we're having this conversation. Is the United States still at war with Iran? Are they not? Who's in charge of the Strait of Hormuz? Who's not? Is oil flowing? Is there a ceasefire? Is there not a ceasefire? The White House then goes, okay, wait a minute. Look over here. There might be aliens. There's the release of these UFO files, right, from the Pentagon. They're releasing what they are saying, the Pentagon, that is, these kind of quote unquote never before seen files on unidentified anomalous phenomena, also known as UFOs. I know that NBC is still combing through all of these files. Is there anything there, or is this a distraction to what is going on overseas?
So it actually may be a little bit in between the two. Definitely. I mean, look, the president said he wanted these things released, so they're following that order, putting them out. It is a huge amount of documents. I was shocked when we started going through them. So like there's 17 pages of lists of documents, and then within some of those lists, there's 150, 200 plus pages of documents. Yeah, so it's a huge volume of information. I will say the ones that I started going through, I didn't say, oh, wow, here's the proof. It's out. It's really, here's the proof that
They're
we needed.
purple or are they green?
Yeah.
Are they green or are they purple?
Nobody
Do they have
knows.
antennas or do they not? Or do they look like us? Are they us?
It's still unclear. We're still going through to find out exactly what these aliens look like. But I will say it's still interesting to read and to comb through. So for instance, like one of the files was a series of letters from someone who was talking about saucers, that were flying, and they had hand drawn pictures and
what they'd seen?
Yeah, and it sounded, from the way that the letter, it sounded like an older person who lives in the Southwest, and this is what she saw, and what's remarkable to me anyway is that these things were highly classified, and in these like FBI files or intelligence agency files, when they were in some cases handwritten letters and pictures. But then there are other things in there also that appear to be official reports, including some from people at NASA. So I don't want to say that there's nothing in there because we just don't know yet. But candidly, it's a fascinating read.
Courtney Kube, thank you.
Thanks, Yasmin.
So the cruise ship that is at the center of the Hantavirus outbreak is heading towards the Canary Islands and is going to dock there a little bit off the coast this weekend after being marooned off the coast of Africa for days. After the planned docking, the World Health Organization, along with American, Dutch, British, and Spanish officials, says the remaining 140 passengers on board will be tested and then evacuated, despite protests and fears from locals on the Canary Islands. And they aren't the only ones, by the way, that are concerned. The number of suspected hantavirus cases has been ticking up across multiple countries, linked to the nearly 30 passengers who disembarked the ship weeks ago. So the big question, right? Will public health experts be able to break the transmission while keeping locals safe in the Canary Islands? For this, I want to bring in NBC News international correspondent Daniele Hamamdjian, who is in the island of Tenerife, and joining me now. Hi, Danielle.
Hey, Yasmin.
It's really loud behind you. I know that you're at a protest right now, and at this moment, we're just hours away from this ship's planned docking, expected to be there around noon on Sunday. Walk us through what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I'm in Santa Cruz, which is the capital of Tenerife, where the ship is going to be arriving over the weekend, as you say. This is the town square. There's an orchestra playing across the street from me, but more critically, behind me is a protest of residents who are very angry at the decision made by the Spanish government to allow this ship to come to the island. They're shouting things like the Canaries are not for sale. They're saying that the health system here is already just maxed out. But that is not going to make a difference, because ultimately it is the decision of the Spanish government. It is their jurisdiction, and they have stated that it is their moral duty to accept this ship. Now, the local president here has made it a point to say that the ship is not going to dock here. I know there's a cruise ship behind me. I don't know if you can see it. It's not going to be as close to this. The ship, the MV Hondias, is going to be anchored nearby at a port that's about an hour away from where I am. It's remote, it's isolated, and it's rarely used. And we understand that the passengers will not be let off the boat until all their chartered flights have landed at the nearby airport. Once the planes have landed, boats will evacuate the passengers. 5 passengers at a time, according to local media, will be transported to the port. There'll be a cordoned off area for them, and they'll be taken by bus to the airport to another cordoned off area, and then they'll be flown home, repatriated to their respective countries. I think the big question now going forward is, what's the quarantine process going to be like? For the Spanish citizens, they'll be flown to Madrid, and they're going to be going to a military hospital. The UK has said that all the British guests, passengers, and crew on board that ship will have to quarantine for 45 days. That's a really long time. And so we'll see if it's going to be a case by case for some of the other passengers, depending on the country, but that's a big question a lot of people have.
So as you're talking about the status, Danielle, of the people on board, I know that there, as you mentioned, 17 Americans amongst the 140 passengers on board. There's a doctor on board who spoke to a local affiliate.
There's things deteriorated and more people got sick and more people got seriously ill, I ended up just taking over and trying to keep everybody going.
Do we know the overall status of the other passengers that are actually on board the cruise ship, and if anybody is symptomatic?
Yeah, and a remarkable interview with that doctor who went on as a guest aboard that ship and ended up chipping in and helping others. Right now, as far as we know, and the latest information we have, Yasmin, is that nobody on board is showing any symptoms. There is social distancing in place. They are taking precautions, sanitary measures in place. And I'm sure after, that COVID pandemic, these measures would not have come as a shock to them. There are people from 23 different countries, nearly 140 people on board that ship, and they're living in some kind of bubble. But some have posted videos, and they are thrilled to finally be coming home. And according to the doctor who our affiliate station interviewed, there are two experts from the World Health Organization who are on board, two infectious disease experts from the Netherlands. So they feel like they are in good hands as we speak right now.
I want to talk about the Dutch flight attendant because we do have some good news amidst all of this.
Yeah.
There were some people that had left the ship earlier on. One woman in particular who was flying from Africa back to her home in Europe, and she got on a flight. She was sick. She was removed from a flight, and she subsequently died. There was a flight attendant who was on that flight as well who had become symptomatic. But we have some good news now as to her status.
Yeah, the test results came back negative, which is, I'm sure, a huge sigh of relief for health officials around the world. And according to the WHO experts, that goes to show that although this is a deadly virus, it is very difficult to transmit. But I want to point out something here. I think that officials are really focusing on this KLM flight from April 25th from Johannesburg to Amsterdam. Now we know that the flight attendant has since tested negative. We also know that two other passengers who were on board who were also showing symptoms have also tested negative. But today, the Spanish government said that there was a Spanish woman on board who was not on the ship, but was on that KLM flight, who ultimately returned home to Spain. She started exhibiting symptoms, and she's now been hospitalized. So that is going to be a great deal of concern for a lot of people, that someone who was not on the ship could perhaps have caught the virus, Yasmin.
So President Trump was asked about this, asked about the Hantavirus.
You have a lot of people, a lot of great people studying it. It should be fine. We hope. I hope not. I hope not. We'll do the best we can, yeah.
We're just learning now, actually, Danielle, that the CDC is sending a team to the Canary Islands to meet the Americans on board the Dutch cruise ship. They're going to be quarantined in Nebraska upon arrival here in the United States, and that's according to the CDC. One last thing, Danielle. As you're there amidst these protests, what are the people telling you? Like, what have you heard from the citizens of that island?
This is an island that relies really heavily on tourism, Yasmin. And one local man told us, if there is even one case of the virus, that could be disastrous for the residents here. I spoke to one lady at a restaurant who said, I hope the precautions are there. I hope that we can trust our officials, but it is the humane thing to do to get these people and to let them go home and facilitate that journey for them. I actually bumped into a couple from Ithaca, New York at the airport, and they didn't even know the ship was on its way. I broke the news to them. The lady told me, you can't just leave these people at sea. Someone has to take them in, and hopefully, again, their lessons were learned from COVID.
Daniele Hamamdjian for us in the Canary Islands. Thank you. I hope you and your team stay safe. Thanks, Danielle. All right. That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back on Monday with whatever the weekend may bring. And if you like what you heard and you watched, press the subscribe button. We'll see you Monday.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.